For in vitro, this is great because the cellular uptake increased. But for an in vivo purpose, it's not very good because these will be rapidly taken up by the reticular endothelial system or macrophages. The other really well-known and material is the cytodextrin oligomers developed by Mark Davis at Caltech. Now this is extremely interesting because most of the materials he uses to make these guys are already FDA approved. And this is probably the first nanomedicine siRNA particle that's in humans right now and for phase 3 clinical trials for melanoma. Now what are some of the things we learned from these successful examples? What are the design criteria we need for designing successful and efficient delivery vectors? We need something that can protect our cargo and take them inside the cell by endocytosis. We need these particles to be serum stable so that they can circulate for a long time in blood and still maintain their cargo in there. The synthesis and production has to be easy, so it's not too expensive for industry to produce it. The particles have to be robust, while the packaging has to be extremely efficient, so that they form nice small particles for circulation in the body. The unpackaging also needs to be equally efficient so that the therapeutic cargo can actually be released in the cell. Finally, the two most important things are we want it to be non-toxic and non-immunogenic, the delivery vector itself. Keeping these in mind, in our group we developed these pH-sensitive pendant polymer systems. These are actually two component systems where one component is made up of beta-cytodextrin. We make these guys cationic. So these materials are basically cyclic oligosaccharides and extremely interesting for most pharmaceutical industries because it's already FDA approved and in 45 different formulations across the US and Europe. The other material is basically a pendant polymer where cholesterol is attached to polymer and alcohol by an acetal linkage so that it degrades in the endosome. It has PEG, that's polyethylene glycol, grafted on the backbone so that it becomes more water soluble and has stealth-like properties for longer circulation in the body. So when these two are mixed, you get a host-guest complex. The next step would be adding the nucleic acid, and once this is mixed, you finally get nanoparticle. Now there are two different ways you can formulate this final nanoparticle. One, method A, where the two materials are pre-complexed first and the nucleic acid is added. Two, where the nucleic acid and cytodextrin are mixed first, incubated for a while, and then the pendant polymer is brought in and you get the nanoparticle. Now, later on in my talk, it's going to become more evident why these two methods are different. Finally, once these nanoparticles actually enter the cell by endocytosis, we expect that in the low endosomal pH, these linkages are going to break, releasing cholesterol. Now, cholesterol is actually known to cause endosomal escape because it changes the phase of the endosomal bilayer, hence causing destability and release of the cargo. So with this hope, we made these materials and went forward. Some of the advantages that we have are that these are biodegradable, bioresponsive, the charge density is controllable because we can just change the charge in the cytodextrins, and serum stable due to PEG and flexible structure. A flexible structure is something I'm pretty focused on out here throughout the talk. I'll be repeating this is because of flexible structure, we don't need as much charge to complex the nucleic acid into smaller nanoparticles. Now, the way it synthesizes materials is fairly straightforward. This is extremely basic chemistry. The parent polymer that's this cartoon out here was synthesized from cholesterol chloroformate and bromopropylamine, forming the carbamate. This was then made into the ether using hydroxybenzaldehyde and grafted onto the polyvinyl alcohol polymer using PTSA as the catalyst. Finally, we grafted the PEG on the backbone, giving us this material. The cholesterol PVA PEG, we characterized it by NMR. Obviously, not a very accurate technique, but the only technique we can use right now. And we have approximately 165 PEG units, PEG 2000, and approximately 81 cholesterol units on there. Now, the next thing we wanted to do is synthesize the cationic cytodextrins. We made three versions. There's the monoamine, the diamine version, and the triamine version, just to see how the charge density is going to affect complexation. And the cytodextrin was made by just taking beta-cytodextrin, which is commercially available, with tocylate chloride, finally giving the monotosylate. There's a very simple reaction. There's also a nature protocol for this. It was made into amine 2 and 3 by reacting with excess amine and sodium iodide as catalyst, and into monoamine by first modifying it to an azide and reducing it finally to the monoamine. Now, I personally hate doing columns, so I love this chemistry because all you need to do is do the reaction and then throw it in acetone, precipitate it down, and it's very pure. Confirmed by NMR and high resolution mass spec. Now, the next thing we want to study is how would the method of formulation actually affect the size distribution and the surface charge. So this is the carbon for method A, that's method B. We wanted to see how sizes of these particles are. So we use dynamic light scattering to get the particle sizes. When they are formulated by method A, you'll see that most of the particles are in 100, most of the population of particles are in the 100 nanometers range. And all the scatter plots actually coincide, indicating that it's a fairly homogeneous particle mixture. But by method B, you'll see it's quite a mess with multiple populations there. And we believe this is because when you actually mix the nucleic acid in the charged CD, these form multiple aggregates till you actually bring in the polymer, hence giving rise to this multiple population here. Now, in this case, since we mix the CD and the polymer first, this restricts the CDs and hence gives you a more homogeneous distribution. The next was we actually wanted to see what the surface charge of this particle looks like. And surface charge is extremely important because a lot of people can make cationic polymers and formulate particles from it. And these are highly positively charged, so they'll be taken up by cells readily. So in vitro, they perform great. But the moment they go in vivo, they just fail because the circulation time is really low, they are taken up by macrophages, and there's not non-specific uptake. In this case, while our uptake of the cells, uptake by cells will be lower in vitro, in vivo we can bump this up by just attaching targeting ligands to it. As you can see from the scatter plots, regardless of what method we use for formulation, we get close to neutral surface charges, which is extremely promising for in vivo. We took some AFM images because we all love nice pictures and baby pictures. And our final nucleic acid particle, as you can see, is approximately 100 nanometers with the siRNA. Finally, since we made an acid degradable linkage there, we wanted to see how the particle is stable, or if it's stable or not at different pHs. At biological pH, pH 7.4, the particle sizes were monitored over a period of 48 hours. As you can see, there's not much change in this. And even the polydispersity doesn't change much. At pH 5.5, within a couple of hours, within 6 to 8 hours, the particle size changes. And as time passes by, you'll see the error bars are really huge, indicating that the polymer may be degrading and hence giving multiple populations, which is obviously what we wanted to do and started off with. Finally, we want to see if our delivery vector on its own is toxic or not. And what we do is this is a regular MTS assay where the materials were incubated with cells. And interestingly, the MTS assay, if you see literature, most people actually incubate their materials for 4 hours. We want to see how far we can go. So we actually incubated all our materials for 24 hours, used branched polyethylene imine as a standard positive control. Branched PEI is actually a commercial reagent sold for transfection, and molecular biologists use this commonly. You'll notice that the x-axis is actually a log scale of the nitrogen concentration, giving us a direct comparison of all our materials. All our materials are about 1,000-fold less toxic than branched PEI. It was obviously exciting for us. And based on these results, we decided to move on and wanted to see if they actually performed for what they were designed. We ran a simple knockdown experiment where we used Chinese hamster cells that were stably transfected with the GFP protein. Now these cells are incubated with nanoparticles for 4 hours, then we wash the particles out and let them grow for another 24 hours. After 24 hours, we just look for how much of the fluorescence has reduced. And that gives us an approximate indication of the knockdown efficiency. I actually used lipofectamine and branched PEI as positive controls. All the experiments were done in conditions optimized for lipofectamine as per manufacturer protocol. We use a negative siRNA scrambled to ensure that none of our knockdown that we are seeing is because of toxicity from our materials. As you can see, all our materials perform comparable to branched PEI and lipofectamine. Method A, method B, there's not much of a difference in the performance. And if you can see, amine 1, as the monoamine, performs marginally better than 2 and 3. And we believe this may be because the lower charge density allows for easier exchange of nucleic acid in the cell. Now this, of course, was extremely exciting for us, and we decided to publish it, etc., etc. Finally, the conclusions. We demonstrate that by using self-assembly based on post-guess complexation, we can formulate nanoparticles with siRNA cargo. We have two different methods of formulation, and that does affect the particle characteristics. The low surface charge has promising implications in vivo. There's low toxicity and efficiency, and CNEN loved our cartoons, so decided to highlight our work. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
It's great work. Can you tell us a little bit more about the efficiency of the cell uptake? It's not targeted, I understand.
We haven't actually done an uptake study. An uptake study would require the inhibition of the nucleic acid, so we haven't actually seen how many of the particles are actually taken up. So that's something that needs to be studied.
Have you done any stability studies using human plasma to see how the particles behave?
All these experiments are actually done in serum. I know that's not a direct experiment, but it's more functional assay. And since they perform in serum, we expect that they're stable in serum, but we obviously need to do more serum stability studies for these guys.